intrusion prevention from the inside out. What we are going to do is we're going to look at the changing state of the network and of our networks, of your network. One of the things I was really excited to hear at the TSC meeting was the discussion of moving to cloud. I've been on email cloud for about a year and a half now. Really like it. There are some downsides. Just like with everything, there's a trade-off back and forth. But there's some real positive things to be gained out of moving to the cloud. But security changes significantly as we move to the cloud. And the insider, or the typical user sitting at the network, has a much greater impact on the network when some things have been moved out to the cloud, because when you have things in the cloud, you don't always necessarily have the control that you had when you were inside and you were managing it yourself, where you could kind of cover for some of those type of mistakes. So we're going to be looking at several of these topics as we go through this. We're going to start by looking at intrusion prevention, kind of overall, looking at how the network's changing. Then we'll get into some day-to-day tools, and some of these tools for this particular group before I've presented in the past, but not everyone has been there, not everyone's seen it, but several of these tools I've put in some new ones that I've used, but there's some great tools that I do want to discuss, some hands-on, and there's going to be a lot of content. What you need to do is find 2 or 3 things and say, hey, I've not tried these. Let me try these and see how they work for me. I don't expect you to if you try and download it all, you'll never have the time to be able to use them all. Pick out 2 or 3 things that are kind of a priority for you, and hopefully they'll be advantageous. And as always, if you've got some questions, email me. I'll do my best to respond as quick as I can. Let's look at a typical network. You notice here that there's firewalls all over the place. Either this guy's really paranoid or there's something else going on. What's happening with our networks? The illusion of external and internal needs to change. If this has not changed yet, this is something that needs to change. We no longer have a firewall and everyone inside safe and everyone outside, because one of our biggest exploits right now is a web browser. Our browsers, most of them are faulty. And I don't care which browser you're using. There are exploit code for every single browser that's out there. Because of that, what you need to do is you need to realize that what type of security precautions are you putting. And now that people are becoming more mobile and are connecting all over the place, that makes a big difference too. How are you protecting that device when it's getting on at a mobile area, which may not even be your network? Web 2.0 pushes this out to the cloud. As you move to the cloud, then what type of protection is being taken between your connection between the cloud and you? And what kind of secure tunnel do you have? To tweet or not to tweet? That is the question. There's so many new and changing ways of being able to communicate, which is fantastic. Whether, some people are just now starting to IM, and do instant messaging and chat back and forth. That's good, but a lot of malware, and as you're going to see here very quickly, has been coming through. Instant messaging has been coming through. Twitter has been coming through, Facebook, and all these different things. People upload stuff just because a site has been designated as, okay, this is a social networking site, it's an okay site, or this is a chat program, so it should be okay. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything that's coming from that site is okay. Social networking sites such as Facebook were once basically consumer apps, but they've been moving into the enterprise. You might be surprised how many people inside your offices are on their Facebook accounts, if you allow Facebook, or on some other social networking, or are on Twitter. Many organizations are struggling with what they're going to allow their employees to do. Because Web 2.0 technologies, it's great because you can do a lot of virtual conferences, virtual meetings. There's a lot of technology that you can do there. But on the other hand, like I said, that also opens up some new threat and attack vectors that were not there before. IDC believes that Web 2.0 technologies, if used securely, can help organizations, increase collaboration, productivity. And this slide here is actually something I took from an IDC report that I was looking at. Advances in Web 2.0 technologies require a new generation of web security tools that go beyond traditional URL filtering. That's where I was starting to explain that just because one website, we think, oh, this website's good, so everything on this website, that's how most URL filters work. I don't care which product you're using, it says, oh, this site is an educational site, this is a K-12, this site right here is a corporate marketing site, this is a sales, this is consumer sales. So then they list them accordingly. Just because the front page isn't a hacker page doesn't mean that one of the pages hasn't been compromised. That's what hackers have been doing. They've been compromising one of the back-end pages that someone will navigate to, and then when they go to that, they have a drive-by software that just going to that website, you download the graphics. Well, at the same time you download the graphics, you're downloading their hack code, which comes straight through the browser, implants itself on the computer, and now your computer's become a zombie to attack other things. These are things that we need to consider. So URL filtering, to me, I think is, I'm still using it, but that's not the only thing I'm using. Because I feel like if that's all you're using, you really don't have a very secure environment. That's something you need to think about. Some of the Web 2.0 security risk. Basically, if you look at the way malware has been getting into corporate environments or into people's personal computers, it's coming from Flickr, Blogger, MySpace, Facebook, YouTube, let alone the BitTorrents. And I mean, everyone knows as soon as you allow people start allowing peer-to-peer, you've got everything under the sun being downloaded, including every virus and every Trojan and everything else. But 60-70% of the vulnerabilities detected in 2007 were web application vulnerabilities, where people are going in, they're trying to do a particular application, but it's been compromised, and that's pulling literally downloading and interacting. I don't know about you, but I've gotten calls from relatives saying, I get this pop-up that says I've got 20 million viruses and I need to download the software to fix it. I'm like, don't download that. Because what they're going to download will have viruses, and people are doing it in the corporate office. I've worked with several different institutions across North America that their users have done that. Now they're having problems with their system, their network slowing down. We go in, we scan, and as I scan their machines, hey, you've got 2 or 3 machines out there that are compromised. And then they start tracking it down between the 2 of us, and you can go back, look through their histories. You can see where they downloaded something from the web where they thought it was a security software, and it wasn't. It was actually malicious software. 1 in 10 websites are infected with malicious code. That's a huge, outstanding number. They're not saying that if just going to the home page, maybe not the home page has been, and people aren't defacing home pages anymore. What they're doing is they're just putting in different little icons, and sometimes they can put, a 1-pixel GIF that doesn't even show up, but then it downloads the software. So that's something we need to realize, that there has to be a way to tell the difference between legitimate websites and, okay, this is a legitimate website, but it's got malicious software on it, so we don't download that. Sources of confidential information leaks. If you're going to look here, and you'll notice that corporate email, of course, is still the top, and lost and stolen laptops is next, but look what's catching up very quickly. Email, webmail, web posting, message board. At GCA, we only allow GCA email for our staff. We do not allow outside email. We don't allow the Yahoos, the MSN, and we've done that on purpose, not only for staff, not only for students, but also for staff. Part of that is to keep everyone tied in and using their email, and part of that's also to try and control some of these threat vectors, because we've got certain policies set on our email, which is in the cloud, that scans things before they get downloaded. Doesn't mean it's 100% safe, but it does a pretty good job. Same thing with instant messaging. Instant messaging is becoming a huge attack vector, because I can send you programs, I can send you files through your IM, and you download that, and boom, it automatically installs on your computer, and away we go. Notice that the lost mobile devices is really going up, and how that's becoming confidential information's walking out. I don't know about you, but I have new iPhones coming into my network every other day, it seems like, and new Blackberries and new, PDA smartphones. As the new smartphones are coming in, what they can do, because they can tie into Facebook, they can tie into all these other applications, they can tie into the email, all that's synchronized. Well, if that's all synchronized on the system, if there's no password, if there's no PIN, and even when there's a PIN, if there's only a 4-digit PIN, how hard is that to get around? Not very hard. Let alone all the thumb drives and all the other stuff that's coming in. You start adding all those up, and that's a lot more higher percentage that we're dealing with how information's getting out of our systems. And these are all things that education is key, and continued education for our staff. HTTP is the new leak channel. Like I said, browsers are broken. Browsers don't really stop anything. If you do a quick search, you'll find all types of code that will exploit browsers. And HTTP traffic is supported by just about every web application out there, and let alone using peer-to-peer instant messaging. But what they do is they're able to use these applications and pull out social security numbers, credit cards, source code, financial statements. If you allow all of the people, you've got a nice firewall in place, but everyone in Treasury is running instant messaging, and it's not an internal instant messaging, it's one that has access to the outside world. It's not just an in-house corporate instant messaging. That becomes a real vulnerability on your system if you don't have anything that's actually opening up the packets and scanning them to make sure there's not malicious software coming through. There's a couple devices out there, Blue Code is one of them that'll actually break into SSL packets because it does SSL spoofing, and it'll open up the packets, decode them, it'll kind of give a fake certificate between the two places, and it'll actually go in and inspect all the SSL traffic if you want it to look for threats. And there's several other players that are out there. But that just kind of gives you an idea of what kind of level, if you're allowing this through, that you might need to consider using. Then we step into, like as I was talking before, the whole mobile world. And this right here is just looking at youth. And there are 1.2 billion mobile youth. And if you look at where they are, there's 99.3 million in North America alone. China has 254.6 million. China and Taiwan and Hong Kong. I mean, that's just astronomical. And Central and South Asia, is way up there. As you see that the consumers, and because they are mobile users, they're tying into their, like I said before, their Facebook. They can, there's Twitter applications, there's, you name it, they can tie all this in through their, and they can log into their network. Down here on the left side, you'll see that there's 1.24 billion mobile youth in 2009. They're expecting that to rise to 1.5 billion in 2012. As a standalone country, mobile youth will be the second biggest in the world, behind only China. By 2010, they expect them to be larger than China, which is just amazing as you start thinking about it. And I'm seeing going clear down into, recently I've seen a third grader walking around with an iPhone and playing applications, and they were actually on their Facebook account. I was like, a third grader. So as I'm seeing this is going down into the younger and younger generations. But then parents oftentimes hand their iPhones over to their kids so they can play games while they're riding in the car. Well, if they've got all these applications where they can get in their email and everything else, who knows what the kid is doing with what's on their system. These are all things that, of course, need to come back to education and some security policies. This right here is from the Burton Group talking about our new network user. Changes, creating challenges for IT. Basically, I don't know about you, but there's a greater demand for more uptime. We pretty much want the network up 24/7. So with the exception of that time, all the other time at GCA needs to be on. Because of that, and because of the more demand and the higher use, and I've got more people using iPhones and iTouch and everything else, I've got more devices coming onto my network than ever before. I have to have something that's going to satisfy all my jitter, all my application needs, and my policy saying what is allowed on, what is not allowed on. And then we need to have decent management tools, training and certification to be able to say, I know what's happening on my network. If we're just going along blindly with our eyes closed, we really do not know what's happening on our network. And you won't know. Dynamic management and auto-sensing, able to correct problems. This is an area that I think I want to see some discussion and more expansion into. There's a few players in this area, but this is an area that is needed horribly bad. Let me give you an example. Before, I've talked to this group, and we'll talk about it later in this presentation, about NAC, Network Access Control. One of the failings of a NAC is that most of them are not automated. They'll switch you off to a different VLAN, and they'll say, here's the things you need to download and install. Most users stop right there, and they call the help desk because they don't know how to install something. They're not sure what to do. One of the things I've seen is I've seen a cloud-based NAC solution, and I'm in the process of testing and have been testing it, where it literally puts a client on the local machine, but no matter whether they're at Starbucks, McDonald's, some airport wireless access, or they're on my network, what it does, it comes in and says, oh, you need these applications, and I have a couple of ways I can configure it. One of the ways, instead of dumping them off on a VLAN, I can tell it to go ahead and download these updates in the background, but don't allow them on the internet until they get downloaded, and it automatically installs them for them. Or I can say, this is an administrator, this is someone who needs to stay on all the time. I'll let them stay on, but at the same time, I'm going to start the download of the application down to their local machine. I'll allow them to be on the internet, and then as soon as it's done, it'll go ahead and install the process, so that way they still don't lose any connectivity or downtime. All of this is changing how security has to be handled. I think the way we need to think about security, our authentication, our data privacy, the integrity, intrusion protection, and prevention, all of this is changing because as we move more and more into the cloud services, I think we need a more dynamic approach to how we're going to handle security in a network 2.0 world, which is moving into the web 2.0. The other thing we need to look at, if you're running a large wireless installment, now one of the things I did is I went ahead and went with a wireless thing that was able to provide long-term. I could have gone with BG standard. Last January, I went with 802.11n. Yes, I paid a little bit of a price for that. And it's not because I was trying to have the latest and the greatest. Honestly, I was trying to say, okay, I'm building my investment now. I'm changing out my infrastructure. Let's go ahead and build to the next generation. And it was able to do that very nicely. And it's, as the 802.11n ratifications, finally getting done after all these years, my system is ready to go, and I'm ready to move on to the next standard. I don't have to worry about, I should have, 2 years down the road, I'd have to replace all my access points. I don't have to. That's one of the things that we need to realize, that as we're looking at technology, it can last longer. The 4-year turnover cycle is not necessarily what's going to be happening, especially as the economy is tough. And nonprofits are going to feel this, I think, longer than for-profits. They're going to be a little bit more conservative on their spending on where they can on desktops and on your infrastructure. So when you've got it approved, to me, I think you need to make sure you look to the future, not just cover the need for the moment. And with that saying, I'm paying for equipment that I'm going to get a little bit more longevity out of. Where are we today? If you look at the threats and attackers are targeting end users. They're looking at web-based threats. They're trying to get into the end user. They're not so much worried about rattling your outside firewall. Most firewalls, okay, there's a couple ways in and out, but it's a whole lot easier to set up a web page and get someone to download the code, then it goes right back through your firewall, than trying to find a way around somebody's firewall. Antivirus, anti-spyware cannot defend against the majority of web-based threats. And that's huge. And most people don't realize that. They say, well, I've got good AV, good anti-spyware, we're good. No, I've seen a lot of machines that have had anti-spyware and decent antivirus, and malware's got loaded on the machines. That's one of the things where user training, and then also looking at something that's a little more dynamic instead of just going by, well, this website's okay, this website's not, where it's actually looking at the pages and seeing what content's on the pages. That's where you got to have more dynamic instead of just saying it's a static thing, this doesn't change. And this kind of explains a little bit more. Originally, we were worried about email and spammers. So, we did, we would identify servers that were sending out spam. We'd say, oh, that one's, able to proxy, so we'll not accept any email from them. So we shut it down, and it worked relatively well. Then we moved into the Web 2.0, where it was a domain reputation, like I said before. CNN.com, it's acceptable, we'll fine, or Fox News, those are good sites. We're not going to worry about anything else that's on their sites. That's a good site. It's approved. Not realizing that there could have been something compromised on one of the other pages, and then when you go to that other page, you download it, and now your system's compromised. That's where we move into today, where it needs to be able to, our URL filtering, our scanning needs to be able to go beyond domain name and IP based, actually going into something that can analyze every single page. The bigger issue when you start getting into analyzing that type of content, you will see more latency. So these are things that need to be considered as we're moving forward. Also, this is where I think security as a service. Now, most of you have seen SaaS and you think, software as a service. There's also security as a service. One of the problems with appliances, first of all, you have to maintain the appliances. And I've got several of them in my network. So I'm not saying that, I've thrown them all away. But the other issue is that helps while they're on my network. but they're not going to come back through my network to go out to the outside world most of the time. And it's not going to be as dynamic. Not only do I have to maintain it and getting all the appliances to talk with each other and making sure they all work within my network configuration, and feel sorry for the person who has to come after me and sort this out. One of the things we're seeing is that if somebody leaves an organization, especially if it's a small 1 or 2 or 3 man shop, IT shop, when somebody new comes in, first thing they do is they start turning off a bunch of appliances because they don't know how to configure them and they don't know how to run them. They say, oh, something's not working, turn it off, let's just bypass that. Where if you're using security as a service, it's a lot easier to call in and say, hey, something's not working. They will step you through it. The changing face of network access control and URL filtering and gateway appliances. We've been talking about this and how it has changed and how it needs to change. Security as a service, here's some players. There's Zscaler, there's FiberLink, which is basically a cloud-based NAC, and that's what I've been testing. And I'll explain more after I'm completed with my test. Amazon also has a solution in there. Amazon's also had some compromise issues, recently, but they're a huge target. But that doesn't mean that everything out there is bad. But as you move to a cloud, like I said, there are some downsides. Filtering as a service. You can also, for example, WebSense, St. Bernard, some of these have made it so they can push this out to the cloud. We use St. Bernard. The nice thing about pushing it out to the cloud is then people don't have to come back through my pipe if they're off campus to be able to get their filters and my configurations. It'll go through their system, which has a much larger pipe than mine, and my users don't experience the latency, especially if they're literally around the world. That's one of the issues I had with people being over in Europe, and that's part of the problem with downtime. You can't defend what we don't know. If you need to know your enemies and know yourself. You need to realize who's using what on your network, what applications. You can see all the different applications, and this is just a short list of applications that are available for the iPhone. And as each one of these applications get loaded on this, and if it's on your network, they each have vulnerabilities and patches, and all this has to be maintained. You need to map your network. The dude is inexpensive, and it's free, and it really does good for some of the wireless. I really enjoyed it for wireless and smaller networks. I wouldn't run it out to a very large enterprise network. The Engineer Toolset, which is a paid product, is a very good product, and it scales very nicely to large environments. You need to sniff and baseline your network and know what type of data needs to be going across your system. If you don't have any idea of what's actually going across and how much bandwidth you're using on your network, and I don't know about you, but I've seen almost an exponential growth in my bandwidth needs this year over last year, because I have just that many more mobile devices on my network. And what types of paths are open to your data? Okay, I've secured it all this way, but have you thought about it this way? There's 2 or 3 different ways to get to the data more than likely. And this is one of the things where if you've not applied some templates, Microsoft's got some great templates that you can apply against your servers, against your PCs, to try and lock them down a little bit. And of course, you have to balance usability versus security. You need to look at your Web 2.0, your mobile device access. What's your data leak prevention plan? Do you have one? Do you realize what's even sensitive data? Do you allow it to go through Twitter? Do you allow it to go through instant messaging? These are things you need to realize. And then also rights management. Can you restrict users, saying these type of documents have to stay inside Treasury? No, they can't be pasted into Twitter. No, they can't be pasted into, instant messaging. Device that control aims to prevent confidential information from walking out. What keeps me up at night? Not just USB blocking. This is one of the big issues. A lot of people say, oh, USB. It is amazing. When I've done security audits, I've many times gone in and seen places where you drop a couple USB drives, people walk in, they plug it into their network, and then you can start getting their passwords emailed to you. You need some way of being able to control what USB devices are on. Now at GCA, I have certain students can get USB, certain students can't. You have to be on my highest grade level, which means you have over a 3.0 GPA or higher, before you get any USB access. And you can use Windows Group Policy to lock it down, and it does a really fairly good job. It's not perfect by any means. Networks is a really good product. It is a paid product, but it's a good product. And then Wi-Fi and mobile devices, the outside email, and VPN remote access. If you allow people to install applications to your computers, to your corporate computers, you have no security, because they can put log me in, they can access it from their home. There's all types of things they can start doing with their machines, and that would keep me up at night. Web 2.0 social networking sites, do you allow them? If you do, what type of policies are you putting in place to keep things secure? And then of course the users, because there is no patch for users. And GFI endpoint security is one product that will lock down the systems, and it's not a bad product. Again, it's a paid product. Guardian Edge smartphone is another product where you can lock down your smartphones and control them to a point. Users, they're all witches, burn them. Social engineering specialist, because there is no patch for human stupidity. I don't know how many times I've talked to different universities and stuff. Professors go, well, if you're going to start talking about, social engineering, that's not security, because, we can't do anything about that. And I'm sitting there going, yes, you can. And yes, that is security. That's probably our biggest security vulnerability. If we do not communicate with our users, we actually force them into becoming witches, because they need to get their jobs done. And they're going to find a way around the system to try and get their jobs done. And they'll come up with their own solutions, usually not very secure solutions. One of the things in IT is we can't just say no. We have to say no because, and here's another option. I think we have to try to provide another option. We started out using instant messaging. We didn't like where it was going using our cloud-based instant messaging, because we didn't have the control we wanted. It was being abused by some students. So now we've gone to developing an in-house instant messaging that is secure, that is locked down, and that is completely logged. That's where I said no, because of these issues, what we found was happening. But here's what we're going to provide as an alternative. Education and training can lower the impact and success of social engineering. And it needs to be not just once every 5 years. It needs to be an annual thing, at least, in my opinion. Control access to your data. If you don't know what a NAC is, network access control, they've been out. I've put in a Bradford NAC at my school. There were some things I liked about it, then I pulled back, then I redeployed it, and then I pulled back, and as I've just been kind of monitoring and seeing the impact it had on my network. And layer 2 versus layer 3, is it truly layer 2? Is it truly layer 3? Am I going to start setting up all these multiple VLANs? Because I know the day I walk out of here, they're probably going to have a real tough time getting someone to say, oh, let's split out all these VLANs, like they should be. And this is part of the decision factor that you need to, as you're going forward. If you're going to deploy a NAC solution, the other side, like I said with NACs, is they add a layer of complexity. Your switch, all of your switches have got to be smart, they've got to be configured. You have to realize, is your timing set up right? Offsite updates around the world, it becomes a real issue. And that's is where I think a cloud-based NAC really has some advantages. Basically, there's a hardware-based, which are appliances, and then you can look at software-based, which use an agent installed on the machine. Then you can start looking at security as a service versus web security gateways. One of the problems with web security gateways, as I mentioned before, if they're off the network, then typically you have no security. This is where if you have security as a service, no matter where they are, it still has control and has some ability to secure the device. The basic typical NAC process. You discover, you say what's on my network, then you enforce through the policies you have, then you remediate if anything needs to be fixed, and you monitor, and it goes through the cycle over and over again. This is typically what happens with a network, whether it's a cloud-based solution, whether it's an appliance-based solution. This is the typical process. Software vendors, you have Sophos Packet Fence, which is free with lots of options, but of course it's a Linux solution and you're going to have to spend some time configuring it. Symantec has a solution, Dynamic NAC Suite, NUFW is an IP-based access, again that is a Linux solution. Microsoft NAP, which is built into Server 08 if you've got your licenses and you've got your CALs in place. It does a decent job. It's not perfect by any means, but it's something that's built in and something that can be used. A little cumbersome in my opinion. Hardware vendors, you've got Bradford, you've got Forescout, you've got Cisco, you've got Mirage, you've got Blue Coat, Cyber Gatekeeper, Trend Micro. And this is just the ones that I'm mentioning are the ones that are still in the network. And actually Mirage, I think, is a little bit, I'm not sure how well they're doing in the market. But several of these have, and there was a whole list of other people that got into NAC because it was really hot about a year ago. And they've all been dropping off like flies. Because one of the big issues with the NAC is they force it off to a VLAN, and it just wasn't that easy for them to be able to download and install the updates. That's where a cloud solution, I think, has some advantages if it can automate it as well as they've been saying. And so far, it's been an interesting process, and I'll talk about that more later. If you need to scan your network, Qualys has a free one that allows you to scan one IP address. There's OpenVAS, which I've used. It's great. And it has found several things on the network. It takes a lot more time to run and to keep configured. Encryption software. Now we're starting to get more into the tools. Infosys, which is the one that GC has gone with. TrueCrypt is also not a bad product. Deckert, which is very simple for users, for home users. That's just some decent encryption. There's email messaging, PGP, which has been around for a long time. Passwords. This gets back into the social engineering. As I've talked before, not to harp on it, but length matters. To me, if you've got a server secured with something that's at least 32 characters long, I'm not too worried about it. If it's anything less than that, then that's not where I would go. And people go, oh, I can't remember that. It's easy to write a sentence. Makes up some crazy sentence that you won't forget. Most of the time you can make people smile or laugh. I recommend 10 to 15 characters to be minimum, to be considered non-trivial. Passwords that are longer than 15 characters are considered secure for most general purpose business applications. Like I said, on my servers, I actually go over 30. Disable the storage of LM password hashes if you've not done that. And here's an example of a long password. Password recovery tools. FGDump is a really good one for Windows. Cane Enable is one I've used a lot. John the Ripper, Rainbow Crack. All of these are great tools if you want to actually audit your passwords. Some of my most used tools. The Google Hacking Database is great. Default password list. I can't tell you how many times someone said, I forgot my router password. What can we do? And there's no reset button that we can find. Or it's hard to talk them through it. I go find out what it is because they never changed it. Nessus is another great vulnerability scanner. Cane Enable again. Autoruns. And Autoruns is greatly improved. And then Iron Geek, step-by-step security training. He does a fantastic job of training and giving you step-by-step tutorials. And by the way, I have seen lots of middle schoolers at this site as I've gone around and visit both public schools and non-public schools. It's kind of interesting how they've figured this out or heard about it. Super Scanner 4 works really good. Event Century. The Dude, which is, again, like I said, I've used this for wireless and being able to tell what's going on in the network. It uses SNMP and ICMP and DNS and TCP/IP monitoring. Perfect Network Scanner. Again, you see it uses everything, including NetBIOS. It's very easy to use. WinSCP, a very friendly GUI interface for being able to copy from Windows and Linux to back and forth. Nagios is a highly configurable, flexible network resource monitoring tool. Very good. But it, again, as we use open source tools, some of them take a little bit more to run. Not all of them. Some of them are graphical and they're just really easy. OpenDNS, I add that as another layer of filtering to pretty much every network I run, including my home. Because if I'm going to do that, then I know I've at least got a basic pornography filter and some other things, and then I can go from there. Now, there have been some issues with OpenDNS, especially with like email and stuff like that. When you run OpenDNS, if you've got lots of people tying into a Gmail account, they might be able to get into another account. Well, let's put it this way. It happened before when the way they were caching it. They've since fixed that problem, but that just kind of gives you an idea. If something changes again, that could happen again. When you go through someone else's DNS, there are some vulnerabilities that you need to be aware of. But again, that's moving DNS out to the cloud, and you can decide whether that's what you want to do or not. CC Cleaner is great. File Shredder is another program. Groundwork is open source, full enterprise performance and network management software. It's designed for large networks. It can be used in small shops, but it was really designed for the large networks, and it works with Nagios. Good product. Can enable are this, and some of you have seen this before. Basically, it's really easy to find out passwords on a machine, and of course, I can run this from a U3 device. If you allow me USB access, I can go see what's all the different cached passwords that are on that machine. And it just kind of gives you an idea of a couple of them. One, I found the password for wireless, and that's not our wireless, but we set it up. All of these were, we went out and changed a bunch of passwords, made a bunch of hackable accounts and stuff like that, and put in really simple passwords. Here's kind of a Nessus summary that I've run before, and it kind of shows you open ports with warnings and stuff like that. Wireshark, if you've not used Wireshark, it is a great packet sniffing. You can rebuild your packets. You can really tell what's going on your network. Metasploit has the new exploit that's been out for Microsoft SNMB2, which Microsoft, as of today, still has not patched. And that's something that Metasploit has a huge ability to track in, and it's very easy to use, I think. Backtrack, and you can run it from or Ultimate Boot CD for Windows. Both of these can be run from a USB device, and they give you a full operating system that is nothing but basically a security or hacking environment. Read Notify for registered email. I've used that a lot. Virtual machines, and there's a tinyurl. If you've not used tinyurl, I've used tinyurl. It's a very good product too. And this shows you running inside, running off of a USB device. Basically, here's my boot. I'm using VM inside of here, and I'm basically using my hacker recovering CD, and you see all the different types of things, everything from Ethereal, which is the old Wireshark, to, and I've put the new Wireshark on my new one, to password crackers, rootkits, you name it, it's in there. And here's Backtrack, and here's Penetration, Metasploit exploit, and I can go into Ninja, which is the auto own, and it'll run all the exploits, it'll go against the system, and it'll just start attacking it. Secure your perimeter, DNS stuff and DNS reports. They'll test your email, your HTML code. Web Inspect will give you a 15-day trial. I think it's a very good product. They were bought out by HP recently. Outstanding security testing software against your perimeter. Security Space is another site where I've used before other firewall options. For smaller ministries, Untangle is very easy to use. It's open source. All three of these are open source, but Untangle, in my opinion, by far is one of the easiest to use. You can put it on a PC. You can set up a really nice firewall, and you can bring in filtering, URL filtering, everything you want to put on there, and you just add appliances. And you can also get paid appliances on there with paid support, so it all depends how sophisticated you want to go. Same thing with Smoothwall. Smoothwall has a free product, and then they also have a paid product, and both of them are very good. And IPCOP, and I've used, like I said, all three of them. Tools to assess vulnerabilities: Nessus, Snort, Metasploit, OpenVAS. Network scanning, Microsoft Baseline Analyzer. It's an oldie but a goodie. Same thing with the dude. GetIf, I've used before. Software Perfect. HPing2 is very good. Xenos is an enterprise network mapping and monitoring, and it is designed for a data center. It's not designed for a small environment. It'll work, but again, it is designed for a data center. TCP dump is a packet sniffer, and then there's WinDump. LAN Spy is something I've used before. File rescue and restoration. Like I said, this is the donut and coffee fund, because people say, oh, I lost all my files. These are programs to go get them off their memory cards or off their camera cards. And there's just a few of these. I'm just going through these quickly. And again, you can come back and look at these. Discover and delete information. Windows Office key finders, product keys for SQL servers. There's secure delete. There's dumpsec, which dumps all the registry and share permissions off of a system. WinFingerprint is old, but it still works, and I've used it to be able to enumerate shares and usernames, groups, SIDs, and so much more. Project management software. When I was rolling out a full one-to-one laptop program, and we were pushing out hundreds of laptops all at one time, and as we were totally redoing our network, one of the questions that came up this last summer when we held a technology workshop for other schools that were looking at going to laptops, they said, how did you map out all this huge project? And I used this Gantt project management software. It's open source, and it's, you can download it very easy. It was easy to put in timelines and responsibilities, and I assigned different people on my help desk crew for different responsibilities. Works fantastic. And there's online hosted too if you want, and you can pay for that. Application and database tools, AppScan, Win, SQL Recon. You know, Web Inspect, as I mentioned before, these are all fantastic products. Some of them are paid, but they work very well. And as we get more and more tied into databases, these are things that we really need to make sure we're securing. Microsoft tools, you know, the group policy management scripts. There's a whole bunch of scripts that are there for backing up your group policy scripts, for, you know, restoring them. File server and file rights management, all this is built into it. Forefront is a paid product, but it's absolutely amazing. I've been very impressed with how well Forefront has gone against other antivirus products and anti-malware. And as I've been using it, very, like I said, very impressed. Not only does it tie into Microsoft Steady State beautifully, if you're using Microsoft Steady State, which is a free, like, Centurion product that comes from Microsoft, where you can lock down the machine and you can say, go get the updates on this day, during this time, all that kind of thing. But basically, and then it will allow it to get the antivirus updates if you're running the Microsoft Forefront. And that's in the process of changing, as far as they're changing the name to the product and changing the way it's being developed, but it's a fantastic product. ToySync, if you've not used it to synchronize files, it does a very good job. VM Security, hardware-based attestation for hypervision integrity. Secure the BIOS. An update mechanism should be mandatory. Understand the level of your hypervisor provides to the host drivers. Drivers are a weak link in any security model. As we move to more and more virtualized environment, and I've moved everything over to virtual, I'm running 100% of my servers as of today are virtual. You need to make sure that you secure your virtual systems. Security policies that define configuration of the hypervisors, access controls, LAN and disk space sharings. Policy updates should be tightly controlled. Restrict the ability to load arbitrary software and security management and other critical partitions. And whatever system you're using to manage those, make sure that that's not a system that's obviously running IM and everything else. Plan for a single point of failure. If you've got, what happens is, as we move to more and more VMs, well, when one physical machine goes down, that means 7 servers or 4 servers or 3 servers are now offline. So you need to plan and say, okay, if this goes off, how am I able to move and bring it back up again on a different physical box? Protects against denial of service. A single host partition can consume 100% of any resource. So that's something you need to realize. If something's just getting slammed, and it's going to start draining against everything else that's on that machine. VMs should not share their resources with other hosted VMs. It's just not a good option. And I don't believe, now there are some who will disagree with me, and that's fine. They can be wrong. No, I don't believe in collapsing the model through virtual, of collapsing, saying my firewall's on the same physical box that my internal server's on. I'm not going to do that, because there are some vulnerabilities to the back-end VM software. Whether you're using Microsoft or VMware, I don't care which one. They all have some issues. So inter-VM communication should be configured very tightly and controlled with explicit policies. And this is taken from Gartner's Secure the Hypervisor, the Myths versus Reality and Recommendations. As we're winding up, we've been looking at a lot of tools, a lot of software, but at the same time, don't forget to look at what ports do you have open on your firewall. So many places I've gone into, first thing I do is I scan the firewall, and then I scan it from the inside and see what ports are allowed out. Lots of times, every single port under the sun is allowed out. They might protect a few of them coming in, but if I can send everything out, all a hacker has to do is use HTTP to download software to a local machine, then they can be sending stuff out the whole time. So that's something that we need to consider. Some paid but recommended tools: Spy Dynamics, Qualys Guard, EtherPeak, NetScan Tools Pro, and it's $250 for a full network forensic reporting and incident handling. LandGuard is a network scanner, App Detective, Air Magnet, RF Protect. Core Impact is an excellent product. WinHex. And again, if you want to learn more about this, or I've got some more presentations that are geared more on the security side and wireless and stuff like that, come to my website, go on the online tutorials. And if you have any questions, email me. I hope this was useful. Thank you so much.